Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of the SWUS. It is Conference Championship Friday night. Got 3 games on the board. Going to go through all 3. Let's do it.
Hey, get the SWUS.
First up, we are in Conference USA. This is a road game for Western Kentucky. This one's in Jacksonville, Alabama. So it's a home game for Jacksonville State. They're now laying 4.5. It opened up at 1.5. Total sitting at 57.5 across the board. Let's take a look at the pie charts. And according to the data, action's coming in on the Jacksonville State side slightly. Just over 50% of the tickets, just over 60% of the money. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with the Western Kentucky offense against the Jacksonville State defense. Well, we know the Hilltoppers throw the ball. That's what they do. That's what they've always done. On the season, they're 26th in yards per pass attempt, 27th in success rate per dropback, 57th in effective pass. Not much of a rushing attack, but again, this is a pass-first offense all the way, and Velkamp should have plenty of time to throw in this one. The Western Kentucky offensive line's been great in pass protection this year. 30th in pressure rate, 57th in sack rate allowed, 18th in pass blocking grade, and they're matched up against a Jacksonville State defensive line that's been pretty terrible in terms of a pass rush. 126th in pressure rate, 99th in sack rate. So Velkamp should have plenty of time to throw in this one, and we've seen throughout the course of this season, since Velkamp has taken over as the starting quarterback, when he has a clean pocket, he will kill you. It's when he feels some pressure, that's when Velkamp runs into some problems, but you give Velkamp a clean pocket, he will beat you. And against Jacksonville State, who doesn't have much of a pass rush, Western Kentucky's offensive line's been solid in pass protection, should have plenty of clean pockets to throw from in this game. Now, we do have to point out, this Western Kentucky passing attack wasn't all that great. They just played, by the way. These two teams just played in Week 14 last week. Should have mentioned that. Western Kentucky did win. It was a home game, 19-17. The passing attack wasn't all that great. 321 yards through the air, but just 6.7 yards per attempt. Success rate per dropback, just 38.8%. So, okay, there's something. If you're trying to bet Jacksonville State here, you can point at the fact that Jacksonville State just saw this offense, and they were able to limit the passing attack a bit. But the thing is with this Jacksonville State defense, other than that game last week against Western Kentucky, they've really given us no reason to trust them against the pass. On the season, before last week's game against Western Kentucky, they had played just 4 games this season against top 100 passing attacks. They've gotten cooked through the air in every single one of them. Just under 298 passing yards allowed per game, 9.9 yards per attempt, over 51% success rate per dropback. So this has been a straight up bad pass defense every single time they've seen a decent passing attack. And however you want to split the data up, it just always looks bad for this Jacksonville State defense against the pass. Here are their games against the 4 pass-first offenses that they've seen. These numbers are pretty terrible, allowing over 315 passing yards per game, success rate per dropback over 48%, almost 9.5 yards per attempt. I don't trust this pass defense at all. So even though this defense was able to limit Western Kentucky's passing attack last week, in my opinion, that just looks more like an outlier, because all the evidence is pointing towards this is a secondary, this is a pass rush, this is a pass defense that we just cannot trust. Western Kentucky should be able to throw the ball in this game. Now, if you are planning to bet Jacksonville State in this game, you can point at this. The Western Kentucky passing attack does seem to be trending in the wrong direction. Velkamp took over as the starting quarterback in Week 3. His first 7 starts, it was looking like the Bailey Zappi days, the Austin Reed days. The passing attack was fluent. Last 3 games, it definitely does seem to be trending in the wrong direction. So I suppose that is something. If you're looking to bet Jacksonville State, you can say, hey, teams have film on Velkamp now. They know how to, the book is out. They know how to stop this offense. I guess that's something. Personally, I think Western Kentucky is going to be able to throw the ball in the game. Jacksonville State runs a lot of man coverage, 8th in the country in man coverage frequency. Western Kentucky's got excellent numbers throwing the ball in man coverage. I think they're going to be fine. And yeah, we do have some cold weather here, 21 degrees, but no wind at all. So, okay, it's a little bit cold. They should still be able to throw the ball in 21-degree weather. So, like I said, I like the matchup for Western Kentucky offensively. I think last week's game against Jacksonville State was a little bit of an outlier. I think Velkamp should be able to throw the ball in this game. But what about the matchup on the other side? We got the Jacksonville State offense. This is the complete opposite of Western Kentucky. This is an offense looking to run the ball. They're 4th in rushing frequency on the season. And according to this graphic right here, they should have no problems running the ball in Western Kentucky. On the year, Western Kentucky is 98th in yards per carry allowed, 115th in success rate per rush, 93rd in effective rush against Jacksonville State, who's was 4th in the country in yards per carry, 26th in success rate per rush, 10th in effective rush. So according to this graphic, Jacksonville State should have no problems running the ball in Western Kentucky. And this is a Jacksonville State rushing attack that's been on cruise control for a while now. They got off to a little bit of a weird start. Actually, Huff was making throws early in the season. They were throwing the ball. Rushing numbers weren't looking great through their first 3 games. In their last 9 games, they're averaging over 302 rushing yards per game, over 5.9 yards per carry. So this is definitely a rushing attack we can trust. And Western Kentucky, not a great run defense. We saw it last week against Western Kentucky, 229 yards on the ground. They had no passing attack whatsoever, just 99 passing yards, 25% success rate per dropback. That's pretty terrible. But when you're averaging over 5.3 yards per carry, success rate per rush over 47%, I suppose that's okay. I mean, this, like I said, Jacksonville State's looking to run the ball. This is not really a passing offense.
I also should have mentioned that Huff got hurt last week against Western Kentucky. Logan Smothers had to come in and finish the game at quarterback. He actually played better than Huff did, though. Huff was like 3 of 10, 3 of 11, and Logan Smothers actually played pretty well. Obviously, we know Huff's better than Logan Smothers, but the reason I'm bringing this up is Huff's actually questionable. We don't even know if he's going to play. I thought he was going to play, and I think the line movement from 1.5 to 4.5 is indicative of Huff playing, but as of right now, he is listed as questionable.
And the Hilltopper defensive front, after starting the season off strong, in weeks 2 through 7, they were allowing 3.59 yards per carry. It was looking like this defensive front might be tough this year. Since then, it's been bad. 5.29 yards per carry allowed, 52% success rate per rush, over 254 rushing yards allowed per game. So this is looking like a straight up bad run defense against a Jacksonville State rushing attack that's very efficient. Jacksonville State should have no problems generating push on the offensive line. They're 20th in line yards, 46th in stuff rate. Western Kentucky struggling to stay on the line of scrimmage. So yeah, I mean, Jacksonville State's going to run the ball in this game. There's really nothing that points against that. Jacksonville State's going to be able to run the ball in this game. The question is it going to be enough? Because we know this is an extremely one-dimensional offense. They haven't been able to throw the ball in a month. In their last 4 games, they have a 35.4% success rate per dropback, just 6.03 yards per pass attempt. So Jacksonville State cannot throw the ball. They can only run it. They should be able to run the ball in this game, but is it enough to cover 4.5 points? I think the answer to that is no. So when it comes to betting this game, I'm going to be on the other side. I think Western Kentucky can win this game. Here's the thing. You might not want to take my advice on this one because this is one of the worst bets I placed all year. I grabbed Western Kentucky at plus 1.5. It's now plus 4.5. So I lost 3 whole points through the key number of 3. So clearly I am missing something. I'm not seeing this market properly. So I have an open ticket, Western Kentucky plus 1.5, which is a really shitty ticket to have right now. I don't really understand the line movement. I don't know if there's an injury I'm missing. I personally think Western Kentucky can win this game. They should be able to throw the ball, but clearly the market disagrees with me. So I'm on Western Kentucky. My advice would be Western Kentucky plus 4.5, but clearly, I'm not seeing this one properly. Next game. American Athletic Conference up next. We got Tulane. This is a road game. This game is at West Point. Army catching 4.5, mostly 4.5. I do see a couple 5s out there. Total sitting at 45.5. Let's take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action seems to be coming in on the Tulane side. Over 55% of the tickets, over 65% of the money. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and if you're wondering why the total's all the way down at 45.5 with 2 offenses that have been putting up some big numbers on the scoreboard this year, it's this right here. It's the type of football game we should be expecting to see here. Both these teams run the ball a lot. Army first in rushing frequency, Tulane is 8th. So a lot of runs. The clock should probably not stop very often. Neither team runs up a particularly fast pace either, 79th and 118th. So what do we think about the matchup for Tulane offensively? Well, on paper, they should have the advantage here over Army's defense. They're 14th in yards per play, 19th in success rate, 32nd in yards per carry, 33rd in success rate per rush against an Army defense that really struggles to get off the field. 86th in success rate, 103rd in success rate per rush. So judging by this graphic here, Tulane should be able to sustain long drives on the ground in this game. And Tulane's offense is coming into this game on a bit of a heater. I know they got rocked by Memphis last week, but if you look at their numbers over the last 5 games, over 221 passing yards per game, over 10.3 yards per pass attempt, over 223 rushing yards per game, over 5.2 yards per carry. Success rate both per dropback and per rush, 50.9%, 51.2%. So this Tulane offense has been very, very good in their last 5 games. Now, we do have to point out the competition. They're not exactly seeing SEC defenses here. In fact, on paper, the toughest defense Tulane has seen in that span over their last 5 games is Navy at 53rd. Memphis is the second toughest at 74th. That being said, Army is 62nd in DFEI, so it's not like this is a huge step up in class here for the Tulane offense. This is pretty much right on par with the competition they have been playing recently. The problem with Army's defense is they just seem to be trending in the wrong direction. Through the first 9 games, they were allowing just 5.76 yards per attempt, under 189 passing yards per game, 84.3 rushing yards allowed per game, 3.21 yards per carry. This defense was looking awesome through their first 9 games. Then we saw the last 3 games, and they were struggling to stop the run. They were struggling to stop the pass. 54% success rate per dropback. And I know you might be looking at this graphic saying, Kyle, that's not fair. Notre Dame's in there. Okay, but even if we take Notre Dame out, let's just look at last week against UTSA. The Roadrunners were running the ball on Army. That's a pass-first offense all the way. UTSA doesn't even run the ball like that. 4.5 yards per carry, 52% success rate per rush on the road at West Point. So I don't have a ton of faith in this Army defense right now, both against the pass and against the run. Tulane's offensive line should have no problems generating push in the run game here. 18th in line yards, 30th in stuff rate, 13th in run blocking grade against an Army defensive front that's been struggling to stay on the line of scrimmage all year. 92nd, 120th, and 103rd. So Tulane should definitely be able to run the ball in this game. But here's the thing, staying on this graphic, look at the Army pass rush. 104th in pressure rate, 83rd in sack rate, 107th in pass rush grade. Tulane's offensive line has been solid in pass protection. So if Tulane wants to drop back to pass with Mensah, they should have no problems giving him clean pockets to throw from. He's been great this year. So overall, I like the matchup for Tulane offensively. I know they didn't really show up and have the most explosive day against Memphis, but like I said before, Army's defense is kind of trending in the wrong direction. I think Tulane should be able to run the ball, and honestly, I think they'll be able to connect on some passing plays as well. But what about the matchup on the other side? Obviously, we're talking about the Army offense, which means, can the Tulane defense stop the run? Are they able to get off the field? Because that's exactly what Army does offensively. They rock you to sleep. They run an extremely slow pace. They get their 4 or 5 yards, and they make it so your defense has to stay on the field for 7, 8, 9 minutes at a time. So is Tulane's defense able to get off the field? Well, I love that 7 in the middle left of this graphic, 7th in success rate per rush, meaning Tulane has been very good keeping their opponents from moving the chains on the ground. That's the number 1 category you want to look at when you're playing Army. And we do have to mention that this Army run game hasn't looked all that good in their last couple games. Through the first 10 games, 6.2 yards per carry, over 55% success rate per rush. In their last 2 games, under 3.6 yards per carry, 41.7% success rate per rush. Now, to be fair to Army, those games were against Notre Dame, obviously elite defense, and UTSA, who has a surprisingly elite run defense this year. Wasn't expecting that, but they have excellent numbers against the run. So maybe we can cut Army a little bit of slack for those last 2 games. Those are 2 great run defenses. One of them is one of the best run defenses in the country. That being said, Tulane's run defense is pretty damn good themselves. Since week 5, they're allowing under 3.8 yards per carry, 31%. Success rate per rush is elite, under 102 rushing yards per game. So this Tulane run defense, obviously not on the level of Notre Dame, but I'd compare them to UTSA. This is another great run defense that Army's seeing. This Army offense is completely reliant on their offensive line generating push. They're 1st in stuff rate, 4th in line yards, 1st in run blocking grade. That being said, I mean, the Tulane defensive line has done a pretty good job staying on the line of scrimmage this year. 29th on line yards, 25th in stuff rate. So it's not like Tulane's defensive line is going to get blown off the ball here. I'm not saying they're going to stop Army's rushing attack because nobody can completely shut down that run game, but I don't expect Army's offensive slump to end here. I mean, Tulane's got a tough defensive front, and they've been playing the run well for over 2 months now. So this is a tough matchup for Army. Now, when it comes to the Army passing attack, this is where I truly have no idea how to include this in the handicap. I mean, they do find some explosive plays from time to time. Last week against UTSA, 190 yards through the air, 11.2 yards per attempt. UTSA secondary is pretty bad. It's a really bad pass defense. In the 3 games before that, just 29.7 passing yards per game. So I'm really not sure what to do with that information. And it's not like we haven't seen this Tulane defense get thrown on. We've actually seen them struggle against the pass in 3 different games: North Texas, Memphis, Kansas State. So we know this Tulane defense is capable of getting thrown on, but I'm not sure what to do with the Army passing attack. They pretty much exclusively run it, as I'm sure you know. So I really don't know what to do with that data. As a whole, when it comes to betting this game, I mean, if I'm being honest, I don't really know how to get to Army at this short number. I had Tulane as one of my top bets against Navy. They beat the life out of Navy. I believe they shut them out. They had 0 points in the 4th quarter. I think that game finished as a shutout. Army is better than Navy, but this Tulane defense has shown us they can stand up to these heavy rushing attacks, and I just don't see how Army keeps this one close. So it'll only be Tulane for me here. I'm a little hesitant because I was not expecting that Memphis game last week. That completely caught me off guard. So my confidence in Tulane is a little bit shaken. But if this number is under 7, it has to be Tulane for me. I like Tulane to win by 10 plus. So Tulane minus the points. Of all the conference championship games, this might be my least favorite. Tulane for me. Next game. Last game of the night, and let's be honest, best game of the night. I believe the winner of this game goes to the college football playoff. Pretty sure Tulane and Army are not going to make it. So winner of this game, Boise wins, they're definitely in. Pretty sure if UNLV wins, they're going to be in as well. So we got UNLV on the road at Boise for this one. Boise State laying 4 or 4.5. Total sitting at 57.5 across the board. Take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, actions coming in on the Boise State side, over 65% of the tickets, over 65% of the money. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with the Week 9 game, which was the Mountain West game of the year. This was awesome. Came down to the wire. Boise State ended up winning that game on the road at UNLV. Final score was 29-24, but it was awesome. It came down to the very last... it was the last drive, actually. What happened was UNLV chose not to go for it on 4th down. They punted the ball back to Boise State with 8 minutes left on the clock, and Boise State chewed the entire thing up. 14 plays, 48 yards, 8 minutes and 7 seconds to end the game. There was a 4th and 1 in there to keep the drive going. It was electric, man. It was a lot of fun to watch. I watched the entire game. Here are the numbers from that game, and honestly, I know Boise State won the game by 5, but that was a coin flip game. UNLV actually outperformed Boise in a lot of aspects of it. 6.46 yards per play, 5.4 yards per carry to Boise's 5.69 and 5.11. Success rate numbers, 39.3% for UNLV, 37.5% for Boise. So UNLV's offense was slightly more efficient, but like I said, it was a coin flip game. Honestly, the difference was that second quarter interception. Malik Williams threw a pick in the second quarter, gave Boise State the ball. I think it was on like the 15. Pretty much gave him a free touchdown. And that turned out to be the difference in the game, because other than that, it was back and forth. But that game was at home in Las Vegas. Now they go on the road to Boise. So will we see the same sort of football game here? Well, they match up pretty well. UNLV, an offense that wants to run the ball, even though now that they've switched over from Sluka to Malik Williams, they definitely have a passing attack as well. But on the season, they're 28th in yards per play, 38th in success rate. Boise State's defense, 55th and 42nd. And honestly, the UNLV offensive numbers are a little skewed based on the fact that Sluka started the first 3 games. Since Malik Williams has taken over at quarterback, the offense has looked better. I mean, the rushing numbers look about the same, but now they have a passing attack. In the 9 games since Malik Williams took over at quarterback, over 8.5 yards per attempt, 47.9% success rate per dropback. No question, this offense has looked a lot better with the quarterback change due to the NIL situation. We won't get into that. And they're matched up against a Boise State defense that I know the last 2 games they put up great numbers against the pass. 32.1% success rate per dropback in their last 2 games. It was against Wyoming and Oregon State. Neither of those teams can throw the ball at all. They're both run-first offenses all the way. In their 9 FBS games before those last 2, 8.2 yards per attempt, 40.1% success rate per dropback against a very questionable schedule. So I've said it before. I said it back in Week 9. I don't think this Boise State secondary is particularly great. You can throw the ball in this team. There should be opportunities for Malik Williams to make some plays through the air in this one. And as far as their numbers on the ground, I mean, they look great on the season. They're allowing 3.45 yards per carry on the year, 38% success rate per rush. But again, we got to bring up the questionable schedule here because UNLV had no problems running the ball in this Boise State defense in that game. So even though the Boise State defensive numbers look great on the season, I think UNLV is going to be able to move the ball pretty fluently, just like they did in the first matchup. Now let's flip it over to the other side of the ball. We got the Boise offense against the UNLV defense. Pretty evenly matched here. I mean, Boise State 8th in yards per play, 14th in success rate. UNLV's defense 26th and 29th. UNLV's got great numbers against the run, which obviously come in handy when you're playing Ashton Genty. They're 13th in the country in yards per carry allowed, 25th in success rate per rush. Now we'll bring up the Boise State rushing numbers. Not that things have gone downhill, but the first 6 games they were putting up literal video game numbers, over 7.8 yards per carry, over 290 rushing yards per game. This run game has still been pretty dynamic, pretty explosive here, but it seems like the video game numbers have come to a bit of a halt. I mean, 5.25 yards per carry, over 48% success rate per rush. Excellent rushing numbers, but over 7.8 yards per carry through 6 games is nuts. So the Boise State rushing attack still great, but not the video game numbers we were seeing from the first 6 games. Kind of the same thing for the passing attack. Through the first 6 games, the numbers looked excellent. They don't look quite as excellent through the last 6 games. So no question, this Boise State offense hasn't been nearly as good in their last 6 games as they were in the first 6 games. But the thing is, this UNLV defense, they have these elite numbers. If you isolate it to just the games they've played against decent offenses, top 70 offenses is where I cut it off. They're allowing 28.6 points per game, 5.13 yards per play, 41.1% success rate. So you look at the UNLV season-long numbers, kind of like the Boise State offensive numbers. It looks like there's some lights-out elite defense, but the truth is, when they've seen good offenses, I mean, you can definitely move the ball on them. That being said, we got to give this UNLV defense some credit, because specifically in the Boise State game, they played their asses off on the defensive front. Held Ashton Jeanty to just 33 carries, 128 yards, under 4 yards per carry. Actually, what killed them was the big plays on the ground from Maxton, the quarterback. 3 carries, 58 yards, 19.3 yards per carry. That's what killed them. They did a great job against Ashton Jeanty, and I think they could do a pretty great job against him again. I do think Maxton will have some opportunities to make some plays. Maybe not 3 carries, 58 yards, maybe with his arm, but Jeanty draws a lot of attention. UNLV's obviously going to make it their main task to take Ashton Jeanty out of the game, make Maxton beat him, and I'm sure Maxton will have opportunities to do so. But basically, when it comes down to betting this game, I personally don't see how this line is more than a field goal. Based on the game we saw already from these two, I do think Boise State is slightly the better team, but 4.5 points seems a little crazy to me based on the game we already saw these two teams play. Like I said, I mean, I know Boise State won that game by 5 and would have covered this number, but that was a coin flip game. UNLV could have easily won that game. They could have went for that 4th down, and who knows what happens. If they stop Jeanty on that 4th and 1, they get the ball. I mean, they could have easily won that game. That was a coin flip game. If it wasn't for the pick in the second quarter, a lot of things bounced Boise State's way. And I'm not saying UNLV should have won that game. I'm saying they easily could have. So I don't know how this number is greater than 3. This is a field goal game all the way. Do I think UNLV wins it? I don't know. I'd probably pick Boise. I think Boise State wins it, but 4.5 points is too many. UNLV plus 4.5. I'll probably put a few dollars on it. If you want to see all the bets I currently have open for the weekend, head over to KyleKirms.com and click on Open Bets. You'll see all mine as well as everyone else on the staff here. Let's have ourselves a great conference championship weekend. Please remember to bet responsibly. Hit me up in the Discord if you need me.